Next at 5, another call for help months before the mysterious crash that killed a Washington family. We now know why deputies did not respond at first to accusations of child abuse.
Plus, the big change planned for downtown Portland to take on the city's homeless crisis.
But first, a unique look inside the job of 2 officers involved in a deadly Portland police shooting.
First, live, local. The 5 o'clock news starts now on Fox 12 Oregon.
Good evening to you. Welcome to the 5 o'clock news. I'm Elizabeth Din.
And I'm Pete Ferryman. First at 5, days after a deadly police shooting, we now know the names of the officers who were involved in killing a Portland man. Officers opened fire on John Ellifritz inside a City Team Ministries homeless shelter Saturday night. This is cell phone video from inside that shelter, which captured the confrontation. Police tracked Ellifritz there after they say he carjacked a vehicle and crashed it nearby. Once inside the shelter, officers fired less lethal beanbags at Ellifritz after hearing reports he had a knife. They ordered him to drop the weapon, then opened fire with lethal rounds and killed him as he stood roughly 15 feet away. Several of Ellifritz's family members, as well as witnesses and other community groups, including the ACLU, have criticized the Bureau's actions, saying deadly force was not necessary. But at least one man who was inside when police opened fire told Fox 12 that officers kept him and others safe.
The Fox 12 investigators rode along with 2 of the Portland police officers involved just one night before that deadly shooting.
Simon Gutierrez joins us now with a closer look at who these officers are and their backgrounds with the department. Simon?
Yeah, Pete, we were working on a story about gun violence, and photojournalist Omar Granados was riding along with the Portland Police Gang Unit. The officers spoke pretty candidly about their jobs, the challenges of policing the city, and public perception.
All right, we'll head down there also.
On Friday night, officers Cameron Fender and Andy Polis were on routine patrol in North and Northeast Portland.
Hello, can you roll the window down?
Fender and Polis are experienced members of the gang enforcement team, working to get guns off the streets and cut down on violent crime.
Our number one priority is to keep the community safe. Copy that.
The conversation revolved around gun violence and Portland gang activity, but at one point, we asked the officers about public perception of police around Portland.
It hasn't been the greatest kind of weather for being a police officer, you know what I mean?
Sure, it's certainly a difficult time to be a police officer, but I can assure you that the men and women of the Portland Police Bureau we're always adapting. We're always going to do our best. And there are areas where we can improve, and there are areas where we can improve our relationship with the community, and we're making strides to do that. On the same side, we have a job to do, which is to protect this community and to lower the violent crime that's happening. And our unit and our department should be committed towards doing that.
They went on to explain gang enforcement team members often need to help officers on calls that aren't gang-related because of department-wide staffing shortages.
There's definitely not enough of us. The whole entire police department as a whole is definitely short-staffed for the demands that the city has right now in every department, in every specialty unit and on patrol, and everyone's running short. So that kind of affects us as well.
Polis has been a Portland police officer for 14 years, Fender for 12. Fender in particular said he and his fellow officers were working hard to improve the department's relationship with the community.
Our job is to make the community safer. And so we need to continue to make strives to be transparent and open and to work with the community.
Now, according to the department, all of the officers involved in the shooting have been placed on paid administrative leave. That's standard procedure in these situations.
All right. And Simon, so recently we've actually heard from the police union as well as the officers in your piece even mentioned this about the issue of staffing shortages. Now, where does the city stand on this very issue? Yeah, I hear that from officers around the city, too, the question about staffing. The mayor recently released a statement saying that he fully supports addressing those shortages, and the mayor's proposed budget proposes adding 93 additional full-time officers. So if that's approved by the council, that could go a long ways toward addressing that particular problem.
All right. Simon, thank you very much.
Thanks, Simon. The fate of 3 local children remains a mystery tonight, more than 2 weeks after a Woodland family's SUV plunged off a cliff. The search is still active on the Northern California coast for Devontae, Hannah and Sierra Hart, who may have been swept out to sea. Their parents and 3 siblings were found dead the day of the crash, which investigators believe was intentional. Over this past weekend, search crews found the body of a young girl in the ocean there. An autopsy was set to begin today, but at this point, there's no word yet if it may have been Sierra or perhaps Hannah Hart.
And tonight we have more evidence that long before Child Protective Service agents visited the family's Washington home last month, deputies received a 911 call telling them the children were being neglected, but chose not to do a welfare check.
Fox 12's Marja Martinez joins us live with more on that call. And Marja, what have you learned?
Well, I learned the call was placed on November 18th of 2017. That's when deputies here at the Clark County Sheriff's Office first learned that neighbors were concerned for the welfare of the Hart children. Still, I did talk with a spokesman today who defended the agency's decision not to visit the Hart family home. In late August of 2017, a frantic Hannah Hart climbed out of her bedroom window, ran to a nearby home. Her neighbor, Bruce DeKalb, answered the door, and the girl ran inside. His wife, Dana, says Hannah claimed she was being abused and begged them not to send her back home.
Just observing the behaviors, I was very concerned that their welfare was not being taken care of.
However, lacking evidence of the alleged abuse, the DeKalbs returned Hannah to her parents after moms Sarah and Jennifer assured them nothing was wrong. Not quite convinced, Dana considered what could be done to help and even told her father the story of her encounter with Hannah, but she hesitated to call police herself. Dana's dad did call 911 on November 18th of last year, but Clark County deputies chose not to do a welfare check.
We ended up not responding to the residents. It's coming down to prioritization of calls, and this call is a distance out. It's by a third party, of something that they have no firsthand knowledge of.
Waddell says generally callers with firsthand knowledge of alleged abuse are, quote, given more credence, adding the call was more than 2 months after the exchange between Hannah and the DeKalbs. He also questioned the fact the call came in from Pierce County in northern Washington, where DeKalb's father lives. Sergeant Waddell says Clark County deputies did eventually visit the home. CPS requested deputies accompany them on their second attempt at a welfare check. That same Monday, the family's car was discovered 100 feet below a California cliff. That was roughly 4 months after the 911 call placed by Dana's dad. Still, Waddell insists the agency followed protocol.
I'm not sure we failed the children. Again, we handle a lot of these type of calls. I don't feel we failed them.
I did ask that spokesman if this particular case will change the way they handle these sorts of reports in the future. I was told that's a question for administrators and that as of right now, there are no changes in works. Reporting live in Vancouver, Marja Martinez, Fox 12 Oregon.
And complaints about the Hart's treatment of the children have been happening for a decade. In 2008, 2 years after the Hart family adopted the first set of siblings, Minnesota Police and Social Services investigated Jennifer Hart. 6-year-old Hannah told authorities one of her mothers bruised her with a belt. The Harts told police the girl fell down the stairs, and the case was closed. Then, as we look into 2009, that's when they adopted the second set of siblings. The next year, in 2010, Abigail Hart told a teacher about pain in her stomach and back. Sarah Hart told police she spanked the child over the edge of the bathtub. Well, then she ended up pleading guilty in April of 2011 to abusing Abigail. A judge sentenced her to community service and 1 year of probation. Then we move up to 2013 in July after the family moved to Oregon. Westland police were called to their home after someone reported witnessing controlling emotional abuse as well as cruel punishment toward the children. At that time, no charges were filed. And as Marja mentioned, after moving to Washington, Hannah sought help from the neighbors in August of 2017. And then, most recently, in March, that is, of 2018, the DeKalbs say Devontae actually came over to their place asking for food up to 3 times a day. They called Child Protective Services on the 23rd. Officials did not get in contact with the Harts. Days later, the family's SUV was found crashed in California.
Well, meanwhile, Fox 12 has learned the Hart family likely received more than $270,000 over the past decade to care for their adopted children. Texas officials say monthly payments were sent to Jennifer Hart, which is common for families who adopt kids out of foster care. Sarah and Jennifer Hart adopted the children from Texas through an adoption agency while living in Minnesota. The most recent monthly payment was in March, totaling about $1,900. The Texas Department of Family and Protective Services tells us they could not continue to monitor the family after the adoption because once it's finalized, law prohibits them from staying involved. Stay with Fox 12 as we continue to follow this story. The search is still active in Northern California, and we are awaiting autopsy results on the body found over the weekend. For updates in between newscasts, you can always go to kptv.com.
As investigators search for a Washington family in California, the search is on for a California family of 4. They've been missing since last week while on a road trip from Portland to their home in Santa Clarita. Police in San Jose say the Thotapilli family was reported missing earlier this week by a family member. A missing poster on Facebook identifies those family members as 42-year-old Sandeep and 38-year-old Sumaya, along with their 12-year-old son, Siddharthi, and 9-year-old daughter, Sachi. The poster says their last known location was the Klamath Redwood National Park area.
I'm meteorologist Brian McMillan. Kind of a nice afternoon after a very rainy morning, and we made it into the 60s again today. We're at 61 degrees right now. We are still seeing a few showers, but they have mainly moved their way into the Cascade foothills and up into the Cascades themselves. Right now, we are getting a little bit of snow, but you got to go up to the upper elevations for that. I do have more snow ahead for Mount Hood at the resorts, and a lot more rain coming at us here in the Portland area over the next few days. We'll break down the timing of all that. That's coming up.
The 5 o'clock news is just getting started.
A major investment to help address the homeless problem in downtown Portland. The top executive who's behind a big donation.
The accused getaway driver in a deadly crime makes his first appearance in a Clark County courtroom. The charges he faces both here and in California.
Plus, dramatic video shows rescue crews pulling passengers from a TriMet bus that crashed. We'll show you what happened.
You're watching the 5 o'clock news. First, live, local.